Yes. So in general, I wanted to start with some background on the food safety programs at IDPH, specifically in the food, dairies, and devices section. So first, we have the Food Protection Program, which oversees retail, wholesale, or also called manufactured food, bottled water, and salvage operations. We also have We also have, or in general, we cover anything that is a food or beverage that is not regulated by the Illinois Department of Ag. So we regulate anything that is not meat, poultry, shell eggs, or catfish. We have a dairy program that regulates farms, plants, grade A products, and manufactured dairy products. They're going to be with us tomorrow to talk about those regulations. And then, just in general, what IDPH does versus what local health departments do, we set food safety standards across the state. We conduct inspections at wholesale or manufactured food establishments or food operations. We participate in foodborne illness response. And a main part of what we do is provide technical assistance, training, and resources, not only for local health departments, but for the industry as well. And more, a larger part of what we do is consumer education, especially on the retail side. We're always trying to make sure that people understand how to prepare food safely at home or how they can look at products and understand what they're buying. So just to kind of clarify, my program is the food protection program. We're going to talk today primarily about wholesale, actually entirely about wholesale, or not wholesale, retail, sorry, retail, and focus in on some specific regulations about farmers markets. So again, just a little bit of background on the retail food program at IDPH. I am the Food Protection Program Manager, Dara Dunlap. I've been in public health for about 12 years, and I've been with IDPH since 2018. I'm in the Food Program Manager since 2022, but before that, I was a health inspector at Sangamon County Health Department, and one of my favorite type of inspections were at our two local farmers markets, and of course at the state fair. So I've kind of come from that background. Anna is on today. Anna Yates is our retail food program coordinator. She's not presenting, but she may chime in, or you may hear me call out for Anna if I'm looking for some additional information on something. So these are the this is the team for retail food protection at the state. We do have another retail food program coordinator coming soon, so hopefully continuing to expand the services that we're able to provide to the industry and local health departments. Oh, and that's me. Like I said, one of my favorite things being an inspector was going out to the state fair and going out to the farmers markets. It is such a unique food operation to inspect. So I talked a little bit about what IDPH does and background to how IDPH and local food protection programs work together. IDPH sets minimum standards and then supports local health department primarily through technical assistance, a lot of training. Really, when you think about public health, when you think about when you think about health inspectors, those are all local health departments, local food protection programs. They're the ones that register, permit, license, and inspect any retail food business. And when we talk about retail food, we're talking about any sort of food operation that is direct to consumer. So, as you can see, we have around 97 certified local health departments. If you're ever trying to find out what local health department oversees a particular county or a particular region, we do have a directory of local health departments available on our website. That can be really helpful. So that's what that QR code is. Like I said, local health departments are really the local food safety experts. They're available to provide far more than just a permit. They're usually very helpful in providing additional guidance, resources, uh, and information outside of inspections. So a lot of a lot of what we're going to talk about today is all things that are typically handled at the local health department level. That's why we have McLean County and Justin Dwyer here just to provide some information from the local health department outlook. So again, when we're talking about the farmers markets, Really, the only thing IDPH has in relation to farmers markets is the farmers market sampler certificate, which we're going to talk about a little bit. But otherwise, anything having to do with retail licensing, retail registration, that's going to happen at the local health department level. So cottage food registration, farmers market permits, food establishments, temporary food service permitting, all the local health department. So kind of with that background in mind, I want to talk about just what vendor responsibilities are for anybody who's operating a food business, public health duties to help you guys understand kind of what our frame is. I'm going to go through the vendor types, and then I'm going to talk about with each type of vendor, I'm going to talk a little bit about the regulations at the state level. We're going to cover sampling because it's a big part of farmers markets. And then we're going to go over all of the resources available for any questions you may have about food safety at farmers markets. So again, for farmers markets, our key characteristics are they're all direct to consumer. It's locally grown produce or locally produced farm products, highlighting product freshness. And it's typically a communal market with multiple vendors, typically on a set day with designated and recurring location. We get a lot of questions about what is and what isn't a farmer's market because we have really unique permitting opportunities in farmers markets. So it's important to kind of lay out what we consider a farmer's market. In Illinois, we also have a regulatory definition for a farmer's market, which means a common facility or area where the primary purpose is for farmers to gather to sell a variety of fresh fruits and vegetables and other locally produced farm products directly to consumers. Just for some fun and to keep it a little bit interactive, how many farmers makes a farmer's market? Anyone have a guess? One. I see two, three, five. One. So, per our Illinois food code, it is two or more farmers that makes a farmer's market. So, that's kind of our baseline. Of course, we know that typically a farmer's market has far more than just one or two. So, different vendors operating under different regulations. This is kind of the challenge that we face as public health officials and that you may face as a market manager in trying to understand what all of the different regulations these different vendors could be operating on. So, of course, we have our raw agricultural products and commodities, and then we have our prepared foods that are like temporary food establishments, mobile food establishments. We have very specific farmers market permitting, which is for farmers selling meat, poultry, eggs, dairy. We have cottage food regulations, and then we have more often now lemonade stands that are operated by people under the age of 16. So I'm going to go through each one of these and give a little background on where that comes from. So some products sold in farmers markets don't require any permit. So any raw agricultural commodities or raw agricultural products that don't undergo any further processing are not required to have a permit. So that would be things like whole uncut produce, grains that have been unprocessed, seeds or nuts, popcorn kernels, fresh dried herbs, or any honey in a natural form. Under the Illinois Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, these are considered raw agricultural commodities and aren't required to get a permit to be sold. They do, however, have requirements for product origin in the Food Handling Regulation and Enforcement Act. So vendors selling specialty crops or raw agricultural products are required to post a placard at point of sale or include a label or packing slip with the physical address and business name. So when applicable, that should also include where products may have been purchased from. And this is really important because products without a placard, label, or packing slip are maybe considered misbranded by a public health official. So in general, I think I have an example of this. I might not have included it. If you take a look at that QR code, we also have this available on our farmers market website. We have a handout kind of showing an example of what this type of placard would look like. In general, what we're concerned about as public health officials is that if there was ever a consumer complaint or a consumer injury or a foodborne illness outbreak where we needed to trace back products, it's really important that we know where people obtain or where that produce came from or that product came from. It doesn't have to be produce, it could be something like honey. So aside from raw agricultural products, we have different vendors that may be operating under temporary or mobile food establishments, so food trucks. These are regulated under the Illinois Food Code and under which we adopt the FDA Food Code. Temporary events, I think the best way to kind of think about this is that somebody would need a temporary event permit if they're doing on-site preparation of ready-to-eat foods for immediate service or sampling. So if they're offering foods in a concession style, or if they're offering like food service from a truck or or a stand, they would be what we consider a temporary food establishment. Additionally, there are mobile food trucks, and mobile food trucks are permitted a little differently around the state, but in general, they're regulated very similarly to permanent food establishments where they have to have annual permits, and those again are trucks that are primarily providing the service of ready-to-eat foods. General requirements for temporary or mobile food establishments would be that they must be properly permitted by the local health department, either as that temporary event or as that temporary food establishment or as a mobile food establishment, and they must follow the food code. A little background on the food code. So, all food establishments within the state of Illinois must operate in accordance with the FDA code that we adopt, any state laws and local food requirements. In Illinois, we have adopted the 2022 FDA food code, which is the most recent, most up-to-date food code. Anybody can access a copy of the food code by going to our website or going to FDA's website. So if you're looking at vendors that are offering kind of immediate service food service, concessions, things like that, they would fall under these regulations. Aside from cottage food, we have other types of operations that may, or besides food establishments, we have other type of vendors that can offer prepared foods like cottage food. The differences between cottage food and food establishments are that cottage food is regulated under the Food Handling Regulation and Enforcement Act. Cottage food is not inspected, and it's based in a private residence or a farm kitchen. So they have a registration with the local health department, but they're not inspected by that local health department. They have different ingredient and product limitations, so they're not allowed to offer products like meat and poultry, or that have like ingredients like meat and poultry or certain dairy products. All of cottage food must be pre-labeled or pre-packaged and labeled unless they have exemptions provided. Food establishments, like I said earlier, they operate under the FDA food code. Typically, you'll hear them referred to as an inspected commercial kitchen. So they're receiving routine inspections by a local health department. They're permitted. Again, food establishment really comes in most of the time when we're talking about immediate service, but they can also offer packaged foods. And then there's no ingredient or product limitations typically for a food establishment. So I'm trying to pull up my notes. Cottage food, again, regulated under separate require or regulations than temporary food or mobile food. Cottage food vendors can have a variety of products from baked goods, hot sauces, salsas. So in 2025, our program actually conducted a survey of local health departments to understand how many cottage food operations were registered in Illinois. There's about 2,560 that were registered in Illinois in 2024. And a majority of those businesses sell baked goods, but another common product that we saw was canned tomato products, acidified products. So it could be a variety of products that are offered by cottage food operations. Again, they're home prepared, pre-packaged and labeled unless they have a specific exemption provided by the local health department, and they're registered where with the local health department where they are located. So they don't necessarily or so they may not be registered in the jurisdiction where the farmers market is occurring. They could have a registration from a different local health department. Cottage food operators are required to be registered with their local health department when they're located. They're required to have certain trainings. Again, big thing here, prepackaged and labeled. They have to have proper labeling of their products and consumer notification at point of sale. So oftentimes you can tell when someone is a cottage food vendor because they will have this placard available at their physical point of sale, and it is required to be there that says this product was produced in a home kitchen, not inspected by a health department, and that they may also process common food allergens. There may be additional language, and you'll see additional languages that if there's concern about a cottage food product to reach out and talk to the local health department. Both. So Hank, I see your question that about placard or label. Cottage food operations are required to have a product label with that consumer notice as well as a placard at point of sale. Thank you for clarifying. So lemonade stands, this is something that came about, oh, maybe 2022. There was a legislation passed that stated that local health departments may not regulate the sale of lemonade or non-alcoholic beverages or mixed beverages by a person under the age of 16. Since this has come into effect, we're seeing a little bit more interest and more activity around these type of food stands. One thing I want to clarify and make clear is that local health departments are not allowed to regulate these type of stands. So if they are allowed to operate within a market, it is really up to the market organizer or their market manager to address any food safety concerns or any complaints. They're not required to have any permits to operate. They're not limited to lemonade. So the law does allow them to sell any sort of beverage as long as it's non-alcoholic. That could include things like TCS products or things that are perishable. So one thing to be aware if you have these type of vendors is that the local health department really is only able to provide education in the cases of these stands and are not able to take any actions or investigate or they're not able to permit or regulate them. So if there's any issues, that really has to happen at the market level. Next, we're going to talk about kind of uh, the farmers that make the farmers market permit. So outside of the lovely produce products that might be available, there's these farmers market permits that cover the sale of frozen TCS foods with a main ingredient that was grown or raised on the farmer's farm, as well as meat, poultry, dairy, and eggs raised or grown on the farm of the farmer selling the food product. So in general, this is for a permit for farmers covering kind of those classic meat, poultry, dairy, eggs, as well as products that may have been grown on a farm but were processed by a permitted facility and are now available in a frozen form. Yeah, Janie. So when we're talking about TCS foods, um, we're talking about foods that require time or temperature control for safeties. That's what the TCS is. In general, the way that you can think about this is that they're perishable foods. They need to be under refrigeration or they need to be used very quickly in order for them to not cause grow bacteria. So they have to be under temperature control. In general, you would use the term perishable or the old school term is potentially hazardous. So things like meat or dairy. I'm trying to think of another good example. Like if there was baked goods that had certain frosting types that required refrigeration. Basically, it just means foods that require refrigeration or have to be controlled for how long they are outside of refrigeration, at least in the context of a farmer's market. So permits must be obtained. So for the farmer's market permit, the permit, yes. Michelle, I see your cream cheese frosting. Yes. So if they had a cream cheese frosting, that would be considered TCS, and they would need refrigeration to make sure that that product remains safe. Anna, is that a good cover of TCS, or do you have anything to add there?
No, that sounds good.
Okay. So for when we're talking about farmers markets permits, they must be obtained at each local health department that requires that permit for their farmers market, and they have to get a new farmers market permit at each jurisdiction. So if they're operating in uh, one county, they have to get a, or in multiple counties, they have to get a permit for each county that requires that license or that permit. The farmers market permit does have cold holding requirements. So farmers must provide effective means to maintain temperatures at 41 or below 32. So either they have to keep it cold or they have to keep it frozen. They're required to provide a thermometer that's accurate to plus or minus 3 degrees Fahrenheit. And if their product does not require refrigeration, they also have to provide to the local health department a HACCP plan or food safety plan from a licensed facility that demonstrates that product safety. So thinking about things like beef jerky. One thing I want to highlight here is that there's not a requirement for mechanical refrigeration in farmers markets. They just have to provide effective means to maintain temperature. So that could be an insulated hard-sided cooler, as long as there's effective and sufficient ice or ice packs or cooling methods, those are all allowed. However, while a local health department can't require refrigeration or cooling equipment, local health departments are still allowed to require an alternate form of cooling if a vendor is unable to maintain food at the appropriate temperature. So, if a vendor is using a hard-sided cooler and there is not enough ice or their cooler is unable to maintain that temperature at safe temperatures, then they may be asked to use an alternate means. Similarly, if they're having a cooling unit and it's having issues, they may be asked to move their product to a different cooling unit. When they register a farmers market permit, when they register for a farmers market permit, farmers have to provide the farm and contact information, a list of products that they intend to sell, information like their name and address and contact information if they do have frozen TCS products that were processed by someone else. If they sell eggs, they have to have a copy of a license issued by the Illinois Department of Ag. So for farmers market permits, that vendor will receive at least one annual inspection, and those inspections may either be on site at the farmers market or that could be at an alternate location. So sometimes if a local health department may, for scheduling reasons, or maybe that's a different, a new vendor and they're trying to see how they may set up outside of the market, they can set up that inspection outside of that time, outside of the market time. I do want to talk about exempt poultry. So this is kind of a new item that is, or this is new legislation that took effect that kind of expands where poultry that are processed without an exempt or processed under an inspection exemption are allowed to be sold. So this is Public Act 1040210, and it came into effect January of 2026. Basically, what this says is that poultry raisers may seek an exemption from the Meat and Poultry Inspection Act from the Illinois Department of Agriculture. Exempt poultry or poultry products may be sold or delivered to the consumer either on the poultry raiser's farm, at a farmer's market, at a roadside stand, or through delivery to the consumer. So, what is poultry? Under the Meat and Poultry Inspection Act, poultry means any sort of domesticated birds or rabbits, or both dead or alive, capable of being used for human food. So, could be any of these products. They're allowed to process under that exemption. That could also include poultry products, which means the carcasses or part of carcasses of poultry produced entirely or in substantial part from such poultry, including but not limited to products that are cooked, pressed, smoked, dried, pickled, frozen, or similarly processed. When selling exempt poultry, they are required to have that product labeled in at least a 10-point font to include the producer's name and address, the date on which the poultry was processed, and a statement saying it was not inspected and is exempt. So it should be very clear when a product is falling under this poultry exemption. At the point of sale, the poultry raiser must provide consumer notice, again, very similar to cottage food, saying that these poultry products were processed in an on-farm facility that was exempt from inspection by the Illinois Department of Ag or the USDA. So that is required to be in an 18-point font. So any of these products, very similar to cottage food, would have these type of placards and labeling. Hey, Jill. So I'm going to give a little bit of background. This was not legislation that we introduced, so I'm hoping I cover this right. From my understanding, what was happening, so this exemption has been in place for quite some time, and it always allowed poultry to be processed on the farm, a certain number of poultry to be processed on the farm and to be sold from the farm. In recent years, from what I understand, the poultry producers have been facing issues with having poultry processed due to a limited number of processors throughout the state that have that continuous inspection. And so they worked I believe it was the Illinois Stewardship Alliance and others worked together with the Illinois Department of Ag to expand this existing exemption and expand the sales avenue where the exempt poultry could be provided with these kind of consumer notification pieces in place. So the reasoning for the exemption has always existed. The reasoning for the expansion is that poultry producers were having a hard time accessing offsite processing. So any product that requires refrigeration at the point of sale generally requires, so anything having to do with the Illinois Department, so anything having to do with TCS products, kind of going back to that definition where we're talking about eggs, meat, poultry, they're going to have multiple levels of regulations and permits because the processing is separate from the point of sale. So while they are licensed by the Department of Ag that oversees their production area, whereas the local health departments, when they're permitting, they're looking at the temperature control at the site of the farmer's market. And so there's different risks that aren't addressed by the Illinois Department of Ag. So that's kind of the reason. The more risk a food has, especially when we're looking at temperature control, they're going to have multiple permits associated with that. Kind of going on, continuing with the exempt poultry at the farmer's market. Again, like I'm saying, or like I kind of talked about earlier, temperatures must be maintained appropriately, just like any other products. These products are required to be sealed in watertight or leak-proof bags or packaging. And then at the point of sale, they're required to have that information placard and additionally, either in the form of a placard, a flyer, a product label, they have to provide consumers with those safe handling instructions. And so that's the same safe handling instructions that you see on any kind of meat and poultry products that has like the little frying pan and talks to you about what temperature they're required to be cooked to and whatnot. If you have vendors that are saying that they fall under this exempt poultry and are selling under that exemption, they have to be they have to have that exemption by the Illinois Department of Agriculture before anything else. So one of the things to highlight is that the Illinois Department of Agriculture lists on their website anyone who has the exemption and the county that they are located in. So if you are trying to verify that a vendor actually meets this exemption, this is a great resource to double check that they have that exemption in place and that they're following the required process. So that was a lot on just the background of all the different vendors types. So just as kind of a breakdown, there's raw agricultural commodities. Oh, there's someone's drawing. So there's raw agricultural commodities, which require no permit, and that's any agricultural product with no processing. There's the there's the farmers market permit, which is issued by local health departments and covers meat, poultry, dairy, eggs, and frozen prepackaged food from permitted processors. That's available or that is provided by local health departments that require it. Cottage food registration. So that is also issued by the local health department. Prepackaged and labeled foods prepared at home in uninspected areas without prohibited ingredients. And then your temporary food and food establishments are typically going to be those that are sampling and or selling immediate service or ready to eat foods. You're good, Jeff. Yes. So see someone scan the QR code. So the Illinois Department of Agriculture did say that as soon as they have new vendors or new people who are issued that exemption, they will work to get that updated. They're going to keep it up to date as they go and as they approve people. So there is very limited number operating in the state. I've not heard yet if there's been more, but they do intend to keep that up to date almost as soon as they get new people approved. I saw another question about there being a list for local health departments that offer farmers market permits. I'm not aware of a list of such. Can out-of-state vendors be exempt? I don't believe so. I'm not sure. I'm not with the Illinois Department of Agriculture. I think if it is crossing, that it would have to be USDA, but I am not sure. We have the Illinois Department of Agriculture joining tomorrow. So that might be a good question to ask them. If not, we can also follow up with Janie and get some clarification on that and put that somewhere. But I'm not sure. It's the exemption is offered by the Illinois Department of Agriculture, so it would be them. So permit types, like I said, there's a lot of different permits that are operating, and I know that sometimes causes challenges and different frustrations for people when they're trying to understand why their neighbor is able to act or operate a certain way, or why there's differences between different food establishments or different food businesses. So we do have an easy to read table that covers more in depth. That table that I shared in the last slide covers farmers market, cottage food registrations, temporary food establishments, and even goes further into food processing plants and wholesale. So that's a great resource that's available on our farmers market page. thing I did want to highlight because I feel like it comes up every year for us, because we are the food safety people at IDPH and in local health departments. Pet treats and food are not regulated by local health departments or the Department of Public Health. Pet food is regulated by the Illinois Department of Agriculture, and they do have specific requirements about licenses that are required for pet treats or pet food, and they can be found in that QR code. So any treats for animals would go through them. We cover human food only. So that was all that I had as far as regulations. I was going to move into sampling at farmers markets. Is there any questions on kind of the background on farmers market, vendor types? I've been keeping an eye on the chat as we go, but when we get into sampling, it gets a little different.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It kind of goes back to one of your first slides. We're a home rule community. I'm in Northbrook and it's home rule. We're also in suburban Cook County. So we don't have anything to do with the city of Chicago. It's just suburban Cook. Can the food inspectors kind of like make up their own rules?
So there is a part of the farmers market regulations that allow for local health departments to make guidance or regulations for uncommon products. In general, uh, the state does have specific state statute and legislation in place that covers farmers market and is supposed to be kind of the uniform set. So, like the farmers market permit is something that comes out of the state statute. Depending on the type of vendor you're talking about, like for the food code, let's say, for example, local health departments are allowed to be more stringent than the food codes. So, depending on the circumstances, yes, they can have different requirements in place than what's kind of presented here. This is kind of the minimum standard throughout the state, with different local health departments having probably different local requirements depending on the type of vendor. But cottage food, the farmer's market permit, the farmer's market sampler, those would be all regulated under state statute.
Okay, thank you.
Just making sure I'm keeping up on the chat. Right. I think
I
that's
have a
all.
question, Dara.
Yeah.
So we've had this come up down here in Southern Illinois a couple of times about live rabbits, selling for food. So did you say that exemption, the poultry exemption, that they could be sold under that at markets or off like the farm?
That poultry exemption is related, that exemption is related to the Meat and Poultry Inspection Act. So I think that has more to do with processing than live animals. I believe those are different areas of the Illinois Department of Agriculture. So live animals, I think, is something that is covered by the Illinois Department of Ag, if I'm correct.
Okay.
I'm not sure though, because you're kind of in a realm outside of food safety, and that might be their animal program.
Right. Okay. I can talk to them to see. It's just something that's popped up in like a few different discussions that hasn't been covered and I wasn't familiar with. So
No, I will write that down.
thank you.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with what different local health departments do for different permitting. A lot of them have different permitting setups. Hopefully, our local health departments who are here can give a little bit more insight to how they set up their permitting and how it can differ. So, all right, I think we're in a good place on regulations, so I'm going to move into product sampling. So sampling at a farmer's market. We recognize that product sampling is a really effective business strategy because it drives sales by kind of introducing a consumer to a product and allowing them to try before they buy. A lot of people want to do it because it accelerates brand awareness and allows people to generate word of mouth about their product. So we recognize this is really important to a lot of different vendors. Additionally, it provides them kind of that consumer feedback immediately on their product and whether there's any improvements that can be made. So, in general, we have a regulatory definition for food product sampling. It means food product samples that are distributed free of charge or promotional or educational purposes. Product samples can really be offered in three ways in a farmer's market, either a temporary food permit from a local health department, a farmer's market sampler certificate from IDPH, or cottage food samples. So I'm going to go through each of these. So we talked a little bit about temporary food permits at the beginning of this presentation. They're issued by local health departments, and they must be acquired in each jurisdiction. And you have to follow all of the permit requirements for the jurisdiction issuing that permit. And really, there's no difference between sampling and those who are offering immediate service. It would be just the same requirements as that. Cottage food sampling is a little different. This is something for our registered cottage food operators. They have to be registered by a local health department where they're located. The samples themselves should be pre-packaged in the cottage food operator's kitchen, so nothing being prepared on site. Must have product labeling information available, and they may need to seek a packaging variance from the local health department where they are selling from, depending on the sampling method. That is something I didn't really highlight in our cottage food conversation, is that cottage food can be sold without non-prepackaged, but it has to be done so with a variance from the local health department, and that local health department, it has to be issued by the local health department where that product is being sold. So if somebody is registered in one county, but they want to go to a different county and sell, I think a common one is like baked goods in a display case or something like that, then they would be required to seek that variance from a local health department. And then we have our farmers market sampler certificate. This is separate from local permits. It's used kind of in lieu of a temporary food permit, and it is issued by us, the Illinois Department of Public Health. This certificate is intended for on-site sampling. So again, it's kind of in lieu of that temporary food establishment permit, and it can cover on-site sampling for any type of products. It's important to remember that while the permit, or it's not a permit, while the certificate is available from Illinois Department of Public Health, the local health departments do have the ability to inspect those that are sampling under a farmer's market sampling certificate, and they may invoke suspension of sales if there's an imminent health hazard, such as if there was no hand washing available. If vendor products are found to be misbranded or adulterated, if a vendor is not in compliance with the exemption provided with the farmer's market sampler certificate, and that suspension can continue until the regulatory authority deems that that situation has been addressed. So even though it is still, even though it is an IDPH certificate, uh, the vendor still has to follow all the requirements for food safety, and if there is a food safety issue, the local health department can take action. So we do have an application. There's some information in the QR code at the bottom. So everything I'm going to go over is as part of this food sampling application permit pack or food application certificate packet. So in general, this is our application. It just asks for general information and it has that all applicants have to acknowledge that they've downloaded and reviewed pre-opening and self-inspection checklists and the farmers market sampler handler guide. So there's a lot of things because the permit can be used or because the certificate can be used in lieu of a temporary food permit for sampling in a farmer's market. It is important that those individuals that have it have knowledge and information about how to safely prepare foods. Right now, our application process is only available by mail. We previously had an online application and payment process. However, we ran into several issues with our system where people were basically unable to complete the application or they would have issues filling it out correctly, and then they would end up charging themselves multiple times. So we did take that offline just because it wasn't set up very appropriately through our vendor. So right now, the only way to apply for a farmers market sampler is by paper. When we receive a farmers market sampler, we receive it, it's reviewed. If there's any missing documents, we have to send that package back with the form of payment. It can take 1 or 2 business days to get just the initial payment process, and then we process the application, and then the certificate is issued by email. So going back really quick, we don't have it highlighted, but it's important to remember that while the application process is by mail, we are able to turn them around very quickly because the final certificate is provided by email at that email address the applicant provides. In general, it takes 7 to 10 business days for us to process an application. There's 2 options for meeting the requirements for an IDPH sampler certificate for those vendors. Both have to complete an application and submit it with us. But if they're currently certified as a food protection manager, then they just need to pay a $10 fee and be registered and to be certified. For those without a certified food protection manager course, they have to complete the application, complete a food handler training course, which are listed on our food handler training website. And they have to complete an IDPH farmers market food handler training. I'm going to go over in depth a little bit more about that iTrain course that's available. And then they have to pay a $40 fee. In general, that Train Illinois is publicly available. When they get on there, they have to create a new account and then search for the IDPH Illinois Farmers Market Food Products Sampler Handler Training. There's a course ID number that's listed in the application materials, so it's quite easy to find. And then they have to complete this once to get their certificate. That certificate's valid for 36 months from the issue date. The sampling certificates are not transferable between individuals, so this is kind of the common misunderstanding that we see from farmers market vendors is that they believe because it's in lieu of a temporary event permit that it covers a business. It does not. It is like a food handler training or a certified food protection manager training. It is for the individual, and then each individual who is engaged in the task of either unpacking food, cutting, slicing, preparing, or distributing any of those food product samples are required to have that certificate. All persons that possess it should display that certificate at point of sale. At the very least, they should have that certificate available for review if during a health inspection. It's important to note for compliance, a farmers market sampler can be inspected by any of these entities, either by IDPH, Illinois Department of Ag, or the local health department. So they may inspect or cease sales. The big thing with the farmers market sampler certificate is that we want to ensure that people are preparing samples on site safely. So big part of that is proper hand washing station, setting up for cleaning and sanitizing equipment, utensils and other food contact services, and then effective means for temperature control. So when we're setting up to sample, one of the biggest things that we're concerned about is that they have potable water for any of the food preparation, ware washing, hand washing that they would be doing, just like in a temporary event. And again, we don't want to see water just being used from common like garden hoses. It has to be from food grade hoses to be able to be used in these kind of applications. So that's kind of a big thing to be aware of. Samplers should have hand washing stations. So a container with a free flow spigot, not a push button. So it's usually like a little lever. We say warm water in this example, but it really should just be water that's comfortable to wash your hands in from a potable source. Paper towels, hand soap, of course, all of these things to make hand washing successful. Oddly, one of the things that we get pushback on, but is really important so that we don't have wastewater running on the ground, is a bucket that's either of equal or larger size to ensure that you're catching the wastewater that's coming from washing your hands. And then, of course, a waste receptacle to discard paper towels. Another big thing in our conversations yesterday with the local health departments, it came up that one of the biggest challenges we kind of face with farmers markets is weather. Of course, weather can go one of two ways. It can, especially right now in the springtime, can be very sunny, can be warm, or it could be quite cold. When it is really sunny and warm, it's important that vendors take efforts to keep cold foods cold and frozen foods frozen. So again, in a farmer's market setting, that could be a hard-sided cooler, a chest freezer. We just have to make sure that we have enough ice or ice packs to keep food cold. And one of the biggest things that we can do is make sure that we're keeping things out of the sun in shaded areas, just so that we're not kind of adding to the issue. Another thing that they may need to set up to sample if they don't have adequate number of utensils or equipment available is a sink station or a wash, rinse, sanitize. So this would be separate sinks or separate pails or basins, one for washing utensils, one for rinsing, and then one with sanitizer. And they should be air drying any of that. Again, if they're there could be alternatives to this depending on what may be available. So this is one of those things where I would have a conversation with the local health department to say, I'm bringing this amount of equipment or utensils to sample, or this amount of or I'm only using single service, something like that, to see if this is something necessary. Again, setting up to sample, we also want sanitizer buckets available for food contact services. So this should be kind of a designated container that's only used for sanitizer. Any sanitizer that's used for food contact services is required to be USA EPA registered, and the vendor should follow all the requirements or all the labeling instructions for food contact surfaces. It's also important to have designated wiping cloths for sanitizer buckets, as well as a test kit or test strips available to ensure that they're using the appropriate amount of sanitizer. I think, and maybe our local health department partners will talk a little bit more about this, but I think one of the challenges that I remember seeing in the field a lot is mainly using the appropriate sanitizer. Bleach is great for food contact surfaces, but there's a lot of varieties of bleach. There's bleach used and made that's primarily for laundry, so it could be scented. And so it's really important that when you're setting up for sanitizing food contact surfaces that you're using the right bleach. And it's just plain old bleach. Other things to look out for sampling, they have to have thermometers. Their equipment has to be in good condition. They should have appropriate single service articles, meaning single use. Um, containers or utensils, depending on what kind of methods they're using for sampling, adequate number of utensils for serving. Of course, we always want to use gloves to avoid bare hand contact, means to keep food and equipment off the ground. Typically, we're asking for 6 inches off the ground, waste receptacles, ensuring any sanitizers or other chemicals that are around are stored completely separately from food, food contact surfaces, or any sort of utensils, and then hair restraints to keep physical hazards out of food. I want to touch very, 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 very briefly on health inspections and a brief look at what the priority items are for health inspectors. So for health inspections of any type of food business, really health inspectors are looking at kind of these 5 major risk factors for foodborne illness. Employee health and hygiene, so that being that people are not sick while they're handling food, um, and that they're washing their hands properly, that food is coming from safe and approved sources, that cooking temperatures are being met. So if you have somebody sampling and they are sampling things like meat, that they're using food thermometers and getting that to the proper temperature. Food temperatures in general are a major concern in any food establishment, but particularly in farmers markets, just because of the outdoor settings that many happen in. Being aware that vendors keep things cold or frozen, or if you're serving hot foods, that they're using hot holding for things like immediate service foods. And then any other sources of contamination, that's where we get into things like having that sanitizer bucket available to clean things and avoiding things like um, my favorite example, which always comes up in these kind of settings, is if you have only one person working in a stand, that they're not taking cash and then handling food or doing something like that. So watching out for different types of contamination. So it's important to remember that we have all of these different vendors and farmers markets operating under different health or different regulations. So the health inspectors may have different field focuses depending on the different vendors that they're working with. But in general, for a farmers market inspection, inspectors are really going to be looking at source. I think particularly on a opening day too, like at the start of a season, that's something that can be covered in the beginning. Is a lot of the questions are going to be around where is food coming from, temperature control. Like I said, in all food safety, it's one of our top priorities. And with a lot of farmers markets happening in outdoor settings and with coolers and ice packs, it's definitely something that they're kind of focusing on. And of course, consumer notifications, consumer information, labeling is a big part of what we're looking at in prepackaged products. And so that anything is properly declared, particularly allergens. Anything else on from my food inspectors I see in the chat that you're thinking of? Anything I didn't cover?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Again, this is Dale from Northbrook. We had a bakery vendor last season, and the products were delicious, but they by the end of August through September, and even part of October, the product was just covered in wasps. Now, I know that wasps don't spread disease, but it was like scary and disgusting all at the same time. I mean, and I tried talking with them about individually wrapping. It was a brick and mortar bakery who came to the farmers market to sell their products. I was absolutely at a loss as to what to do.
Pest control is definitely something that we're concerned about and any sort of contamination. So I think that if you were having those kind of concerns, that you could talk to the local health department to kind of talk about possible contamination if they are out in the open. Because if there's insects around, and they're able to touch food, then there's probably other physical concerns around that might be there. So that's definitely something that you could look, especially if they have a food establishment permit from, in addition to their farmer's market permit, that is something that I would talk to the local health department about. Oh, I saw the question about raw foods. So raw agricultural raw agricultural products are not required to have a permit, but yes, if they are sampling fresh raw produce, they should have um, either a temporary food establishment permit given or that farmer's market sampler certificate. Because once it's being prepared, it falls into those other categories of food and additional food safety requirements need to be met.
There are a couple other cottage food questions.
I miss them.
One is about pumpkin. Can you address that?
So pumpkin pies are prohibited from cottage food, but pumpkin products are not. So cottage food in general, there's products that are allowed and then there's products that are prohibited. Pumpkin pie is strictly prohibited in the cottage food regulations. It does not have the ability to, um, there's no exception or exemptions provided. So that's just one that's prohibited. You can sell other pumpkin products, so like pumpkin muffins or other baked goods containing pumpkin, but pumpkin pies just aren't allowed.
Okay, let's see, there was another one in here too.
I see the question, and I think it's related to the variance associated with packaging. So the way that the cottage food regulations are written, the cottage food vendors are registered with their local health department where they reside or where they're located. But the way that the packaging exemption works, to have a packaging exemption, it has to be with the local health department where the item is being sold. So if they're registered in County A, but they're in the farmer's market of County B, they have to get a packaging exemption for County B to sell. They
Derek,
could still have that same variance with County A, and they could, bring that information and documentation and that process over, but it comes down to that other local health department because it's being sold in that jurisdiction unpackaged.
Derek, can I ask a follow-up question to my question?
I don't know which question here is, so sure.
Mine is the one with, this is here in, mine is the one about if you can clarify where the local health department where the cottage food items are being sold has to register. So
Mhm.
they don't have to be, we don't have to be registered in two counties as cottage food vendors. We just need the labels from one county to the other. So whatever our cottage food
You,
label.
you, yeah, you would only be registered in the county where you reside, but if you wanted to sell your products without packaging outside of your registering, or well, if you wanted to sell your products unpackaged in general, if whether it's in that jurisdiction or another, you would have to get a packaging exemption from each.
Right.
Otherwise, package or cottage food is required to be prepackaged and labeled. A common use of that is baked goods to order or baked goods that might be sold in different formats. So you can get an exemption or a variance. I can't remember how exactly it's labeled in the law, if it's a variance or exemption, but you have to seek that with each local health department for packaging. But you only register as a cottage food operator where you live.
I think those are all the questions that I see. They may be embedded in one another, but I think we got them.
Good. I love the discussion. Um, I do want to touch very briefly. Foodborne illnesses can happen in any setting where food is sold. So I'm not saying that, that there's any more risk in a farmer's market than anywhere else. But there have been outbreaks associated with foods that may be available at farmers markets. Things like home canned goods are. So I did want to talk really briefly that if there was a foodborne illness outbreak, that local health departments lead investigations during foodborne illness outbreaks, and that during investigations, local health departments may need help in collecting information about different vendors or products or dates or things that are happening around event dates. I just wanted to say that the goal of these investigations is to identify products that made people ill and then prevent others from becoming ill. So while it can seem like an overwhelming process with a lot of questions. We're not trying to get anybody in trouble or point any fingers at people. We really our primarily goal is to make sure that people don't get ill. So that's something that you should be aware of, just as being a place where food is sold.
Did you see the new question about Will County is requiring cottage food vendors to apply for a special event license and receive an inspection? If
I'm
they,
not familiar with that.
I think that's one we can talk about offline. You can send us some more information on that.
Yeah, so anywhere, if you do not have the IDPH farmers market sampler permit, then anywhere you are going between jurisdictions, you may need a sampling permit if you are offering those type of samples. And to be very clear, our sampler certificate only covers sampling in farmers markets. So if somebody with a sampler certificate was trying to sample at a state fair or a festival or a different event, that would not be covered. It is only covered in farmers markets under the regulatory definition. So takeaways, I just wanted to share that food safety or share some final takeaways. Food safety is a shared responsibility amongst food businesses and public health officials. There are a lot of different permit types operating in a farmer's market, so it can be a little challenging. Local health departments are the regulatory authority for vendors and farmers markets, so they really are kind of the local go-to on any questions about what's required or what's needed or what the options available are. Um, Connect with your health department early and often throughout the season, especially as things come up or if you have concerns about vendors or anything like that. And while regulations change, risk factors remain consistent across any food operation. So those kind of key things you can look out for, that temperature control, making sure food's coming from approved sources, and labeling are all kind of the major things that we look at. If you weren't familiar, we have a ton of resources around farmers markets, cottage food. So our farmers market food safety guide, where a lot of this information is shared, is available. Our farmers market sampler certificate packet, our permit table, our wonderful cottage food guide that came out of the cottage food stakeholder group. I saw a lot of cottage food questions, so that's a great resource for there. And I think a new version is coming very soon. We also have guidance for shared kitchens, temporary food, and if anyone's interested in scaling up to selling business to business, we have manufactured food resources as well. If raw food farmers sample, they need a permit. If they are preparing the food for samples, then they need a permit. That's everything I have. Hopefully, if anyone has questions, I'm here. Uh, Please never hesitate to reach out to the IDPH Food Protection Program if you have any questions. We always recommend you start with your local health department, especially if it's about permitting or registration, but we're always happy to help or help connect you with your local health department or another local health department if you're going to a new jurisdiction. We have two email boxes, our dph.mfgfood for manufactured or wholesale food, and dph.food@illinois.gov for any retail questions. Anna, who I mentioned at the beginning, is dedicated to keeping new guidance materials out on our food safety page. So check out our food safety pages and let us know. Otherwise, I'm available for questions. I know we've been kind of answering as we go. I purposely kind of left some time. Anna, was there anything that you wanted to add that I missed?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered everything. Unless there was any questions. Or
I'm not seeing any questions pop up.
Hi, it's here, and again, I have a quick question. Are there any alternatives that are acceptable to the sampler certification?
Alternatives to,
Are there any types of things that a vendor may already have that can be acceptable for sampling? For example, if they have a food manager certification, not just a food handler certification, is that okay? Or if there's a municipality or a city that we know has higher or more stringent requirements and they have to go through certain trainings locally to do it, and they show us one of those certificates, is that okay? In place of the state's sampler certification.
I see. So that would be something that I would discuss with the local health department that you're located in. So the farmers market sampling certificate is really just a certificate that is intended to be used in lieu of somebody seeking multiple permits throughout the state. So really it comes down to the local jurisdiction on if they would accept something other than our state certificate in lieu of a temporary event for sampling. Different farmer or different local health departments may have different requirements or different policies around sampling or what they allow under, if you have a temporary event permit, you can obviously sample or things like that. So it would be something to discuss with wherever local health department you're located, if they would be willing to accept something. Otherwise, if you did have a certified food protection manager certificate, then getting the IDPH sampler certificate would be $10 and would cover those farmers markets for 3 years.
But is it a requirement? I guess that's what I mean. Is an
No.
alternative acceptable?
It is not a requirement. It is just something that is available in lieu of seeking alternate permits,
Okay.
unless the local health department requires it for some reason.
Okay. That's all I wanted to know. Thank you so much.
I say, if there's no more questions, I think we have time if we want to include like a short break until we get into our local health departments and get our next speaker set up, Janie.
Sure. Do you want to go till 1:30 and then we'll be right back to continue?
Sounds great. Give everybody a time to stretch. Some people have heard me talk for a lot in 2 days. Next, next up today, we have Xavier from the McLean County Environmental Health Division, who's going to present on their approach to collaborating with their farmers markets. Take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Xavier Brayboy. I am an environmental health practitioner in the McLean County Environmental Health Division. I started on the team in 2022, and then in 2023, I did start helping my fellow coworkers, starting doing inspections for the farmers market. If you don't know where we're located in Illinois, we're between Champaign County and Peoria County, so we are home to Illinois State University. Bloomington, Normal are our biggest municipalities, but we currently have about 7 different farmers markets that take place throughout the county. This presentation is mostly designed to help you as market managers build and establish clear communication with your health department when planning the farmers market season ahead. If you want to add a barrier or problem that you have ran into in the past when organizing farmers markets, feel free to send that in the chat. And if we have time at the end, we can discuss that. I joined the Zoom around 1, so I hope I'm not repeating anything or being redundant, but I'll basically just keep going. So it's really never too early to start preparing for the farmers market season. We recommend and appreciate when you reach out to us as your local health department early on with questions and sending vendors who are applying to have a spot at your market to us. Sometimes it's nice to schedule like a meeting. Hey, this is the expectation for the year ahead. This is what we kind of have a game plan for. What are your recommendations and what are your requirements? So that we're all on the same page and that we can give a clear and concise message across the board. If you receive an application from a vendor that wants to sell food at the farmer's market and they can't provide adequate licensure, whether that is they're a farmer and they're trying to sell meat, or they're a cottage food operator and they don't have that registration, send them to us and we're going to get them what they need to be able to do it. We try to work as fast as we can, but we do have a lot of things going on in our offices, but we'll get them what they need so they can, make their dreams happen. If we have that meeting early on, we can provide you guys applications, whether that's cottage food applications or permit applications, so that you can give to your proposed vendors along with our business cards so they can just pick up the phone or email us when their questions or thoughts come up. I started helping in 2023 with the City of Bloomington Farmers Market, and then I was assigned in 2024 and 2025 to organize it and kind of go through the permits with those vendors. This market goes year round, but it is busiest during the outdoor season, which is May through October. While I was working with the City of Bloomington, who is the main organizer, their economic and development division, they were able to give us access to this really nice website. It's called Manage My Market. And basically, we were able to create our own login. And then as they were going through approval processes for each vendor, we could see where they were at. We could see where are they from, what type of food are they going to sell, what dates are they going to be there, so that we could schedule out the summer so we know when do we need to be there. If the City of Bloomington didn't know everything, which is totally fine, we were able to then contact these vendors ourselves. I will be honest, a lot of the times when we as the health department are reaching out to vendors kind of out of the blue, people do get on the defensive. So what's nice is to kind of tell them, say you get an application, I want to be a vendor at your market. If they can't give you X, Y, and Z, like I have this license, I am from this county, and I've talked to the health department already, kind of like a checklist. Maybe you send them our way and we kind of start that communication early on so that it's not a week before the market and we're trying to, break any loose ends. I want to see if I can go to this website just so you guys can see it. I'm not going to log in, and maybe you guys use this. Can you guys see this page? Or is it still just showing my presentation?
It's just on
It's
your
not-
presentation.
Okay.
Hmm.
Maybe when we get back to the end, I will show you guys it once more. Okay. We'll backtrack to it later. As I kind of explained, we always want to verify that a vendor who's been approved already has an active permit so they don't have to backtrack and kind of jump through hoops later. It's nice to go through the process just in a sequential order almost. So always make sure that they are who they say they are, they're doing things the proper way and going through the right avenues. Um, a lot of vendors are traveling over county lines. So maybe you're getting a food truck from another county, or it's a cottage food operator from the opposite side of the state. A lot of counties are putting on their cottage food um, lists on their website. This link on the bottom does go to McLean County's website. Again, I'll go to it at the end of the presentation so that you guys can see it. We really try to keep that as up to date as possible so that it's accurate. And in McLean County, you have to register yearly to make sure that if your menu's changed or if they've changed their labels. Sometimes people move more often than we think. Um, in order for us to approve a cottage food operator, and I hope I'm not repeating things that you guys have already talked about, but they need to give us a list of ingredients. They need to show us the label that they're going to put on their products. Um, the food can't need refrigeration or be considered a time temperature control for safety food. I know like one of the things you guys mentioned was pumpkin pie. So things like that we're really not going to approve just because of the risk associated with it. So we have our process for how we approve cottage food operators and what they can and can't make. When we approve a cottage food operator, we give them a registration sign. When they go from place to place, they do need to have that registration available. One of the markers on their labels needs to say that this isn't an inspected item. But they have been approved by their local health department. Um, and that's kind of just to inform their customer. Common permits available for markets in McLean County, and I do believe that this is kind of more widespread throughout the state right now, is the farmer's market permit. So this is good for a full year, 12 months. It does expire at the end of the year, and the farmer will need to reapply the following year. The definition of a comes from 410 ILCS 625-3.3. Farmer means an individual who is a resident of Illinois and owns or leases land in Illinois that is used as a farm as that term is defined in section 1-60 of the property tax code or that individual's employee. So this permit allows animal products to be sold, meat, eggs, dairy products, things like soap, things that aren't food that we're not going to ingest that doesn't need a permit. Because I know a lot of farmers are kind of dabbling in different things, which is awesome. This is typically a less expensive option compared to like a full restaurant permit, because they're typically just using this at a farmer's market. Um, like I said earlier, a lot of people are getting like food trucks at a farmer's market right now. They would typically need a mobile food permit, and they could do that for either like a 6 month session or for a full year. Um, because those, when you're doing a farmer's market, they might be really busy. We might not be going and doing an inspection, but we will probably check in, just see how they're doing. And if they are due for a routine inspection, we're gonna get that done while we're there. Um, Cottage food registration, it's not really a permit, it's a registration like we talked about because they're not getting inspected. Um, some exceptions to getting a permits, we consider bake sales that are for non-for-profits that they can do 1 to 2 bake sales a year. They just can't have refrigerated items and it has to be prepackaged only. Um, so I believe in the city of Bloomington, they kind of have a rotation of bake sales, different non-for-profits switch off every week. We kind of check in on them, but we're not doing inspections and we don't require a permit for those. Um, the poultry and rabbit exemption is a little bit newer. Um, they have to basically apply for that through, I think it's IDOA. Um, we will probably check on temperatures, make sure if they do have meat that it's staying frozen, and that packaging is well kept and that labeling is where it needs to be. And then some wholesale operators go to county farmers markets. We do have a pretty good knowledge of that and a good relationship with IDPH, so we can verify with them if their wholesale license is up to date and where it needs to be. We're really going to be looking at proper labeling. There is the rare chance that they might be sampling. I believe the sampling certificate that was talked about earlier, I think that is for farmers and then cottage food operators, and they can only do this at farmers markets. I don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong, if wholesale vendors would really be able to do that sampling certificate. I don't think so.
They could, but it's probably we have people who have received that. They would have to meet the same requirements though to have a CFPM and or the training. So we do not see it very often, but sometimes people may do that if they have a canned product and they're offering sampling. They're not excluded from that for being a manufactured food processor, but generally, they're not seeking that kind of permit or certification.
Okay. So it really kind of just comes back to the county that you're working in and what their expectation is. Um, and we'll go into a little bit more about what these different permits require in means of like equipment. This is kind of how we as inspectors are preparing for inspections for the farmers market. Um, if there's going to be a large amount of vendors at that first market, that's probably the one we're going to try to go to so that we can kind of nip any issues in the bud and that we can start building rapport earlier, with operators and the organizers themselves, getting on a first name basis, meeting them face to face so they can put a face to the name finally, as opposed to just an email or a phone call. Um, in Bloomington, I'm always gonna keep going back to this one because it's the one I'm most familiar with, and it's a pretty large farmers market. Um, we typically have 1 to 2 inspectors go so we can kind of divide and conquer. And if it's a learning opportunity, we're gonna bring someone so that they can see just what to expect moving forward. Um, we want to make sure that these vendors have the necessary equipment they need. If they have refrigerated foods or frozen foods, meat or eggs or dairy products, we're going to make sure they have a thermometer. We're going to be making sure that their food is at the right temperature. People who are doing sampling. So there are a couple vendors that have made like bacon or cut up summer sausage and offered that for sampling. We're going to make sure that they have the proper means to wash, rinse, and sanitize their food contact surfaces. Because sometimes those markets do go on for a couple hours, so they do need a couple options for what to do throughout that day. Cottage food, we're going to them, we're going to those vendors, we're verifying that they have the proper labels. Sometimes those vendors have made that food fresh like the day before, and maybe they didn't have an opportunity to label everything. It's a good thing for them to have extra labels so that they can put that on their products. If we find something that's not labeled and they don't have a means to label it, we are going to ask them to just put it to the side and not sell it that day.
unless they can provide us with a label that they can give to their customers. Um, And those labeling requirements for cottage food are all explained in the Cottage Food Act. Like I mentioned, it needs to be ingredients, allergens, the statement that this food is not inspected. And I think typically they are putting like the date they make it so their customers know how fresh it is. Um, Sampling, those who are sampling, they need to have proper hand washing for if they're handling unpackaged foods. Some people do pre-portion their samples. If they're doing cottage food, maybe they did that at home. Um, and then they wouldn't necessarily need a hand washing setup. Um, the different types of hand sink setups that I've seen are the temporary hand washing sinks. So either like a jug with free flowing spigot so water can flow, soap, paper towels, and a bucket for proper catch. There are those new sort of foot pumping hand sinks that you don't have to worry about water going everywhere. It's all pretty much self-contained. And then depending on how big your market is, maybe you're getting the really nice movable, rentable hand washing stations that kind of go hand in hand with like the porta potty companies. Again, those are kind of staying contained, and those are nice for longer events where you need a lot of water or when a vendor is really busy. And something that we do maybe early on is talk to vendors who are going to be washing their hands there or doing like a 3 basin sink setup for food contact surfaces. We want to know where that wastewater is going to go. We don't allow that water that's been used to go into storm sewers. Something that could be an option. It really just depends on where your market is set up. If you're close to a brick and mortar building that has a mop sink inside, maybe you give them a heads up and ask them if they would be comfortable with your vendors using that later to dispose of their wastewater. And that's just so it doesn't go onto the ground surface and then it doesn't go into our storm sewers, or that they have to bring it all the way back to where they were preparing the food in the first place. So this is more about for during the market itself. Um, we are trying to get there at least an hour to 30 minutes before the market so that we're not scrambling while customers are there trying to get all their produce, all their meat, and all the goodies that they want to get for the day. We'll typically come and try to talk to you guys just to see if there's any new adjustments or changes that have been made. Um, Depending on the size of your market, maybe you have a map so that people that are coming to purchase products know exactly where they're going to go or kind of can game plan. And we're looking at that too. We want to know I have to go here, here, and here. Um, it is a good thought to think of maybe doing like an emergency phone tree and maybe including a representative from your health department so that say weather issues come up or someone um, isn't complying with food safety expectations, that you can give us a heads up and we'll let you know, hey, we're going to be here at this time. This is what you guys can do. This is what they should do, et cetera, et cetera. For resource sharing, like I had mentioned, when we do those inspections, we want to make sure the vendors have everything they need to work throughout the whole day. So they need test strips, thermometers. As I said, we can give you guys educational resources. Maybe people are gonna find you that day and say, hey, I would love to be a participant in this market. What do I need to do? We can give you those business cards and we can give you kind of educational handouts that you guys can give to them. We don't expect you guys to um, provide endless amounts of test strips and thermometers. Maybe have it be like almost like a library system where they forgot some that day. Maybe you guys have like a couple extra and you ask for them back at the end of it. And then I know sometimes it's frowned upon to like share hand washing stations, but maybe you guys have extra paper towels or soap so that if someone does have a busy day, they don't run out and have to stop sampling because that is kind of what would need to happen if they do run out of supplies at some point. They should stop kind of their process of what they're doing and go to just we're selling what we have as prepackaged. And like I said, if you guys see something, say something to us. We try to see issues that arise. We can't be everywhere all at once. So hold yourselves accountable, hold your vendors accountable because we want to make sure that the people coming and supporting the markets want to keep coming because they had a good experience and that they are bringing safe food home. Um, kind of, I'll explain, not super in depth, but codes to know and common violations observed during farmers markets. Temperatures. So cold food needs to be kept at 41 degrees Fahrenheit or less. We see a lot of eggs being sold at the markets now. The stipulation with eggs is that when they arrive to the place that they're going to be sold, their shell egg can be 45 degrees Fahrenheit, but then they need to be stored at 41. So it's kind of weird. We might not be getting there right when those eggs arrive at the market. But when we're taking temperatures, we're going to try to make sure, and we want to make sure that they're at 41 degrees Fahrenheit or less. Um, for vendors that are cooking food, maybe it's probably most of our meat suppliers, our meat farmers might be cooking food. Looking at 140 degrees Fahrenheit or above for hot holding and all the necessary cooking temperatures for whatever meat that they are selling and offering. Sanitizer concentration, whether they're using bleach or quaternary ammonia or on the rare occasion iodine sanitizer, we want to make sure that they're using their test strips appropriately and they're getting that to the right concentration for safety. All food needs to come from an approved source. So we're trying to stop that before we even get to the market. There are some times where we come and there's like a vendor that showed up last minute that didn't go through the proper avenues. And maybe they made food at home and they weren't supposed to, and they don't have like a cottage food license already or a cottage food registration. So at that point, we kind of need to step in, talk to the organizer, and make an executive decision. This food is not considered safe to be served to the public. And this is kind of what the timeline of correction can look like. Like we would really need them to get in an application as soon as possible. But that day they might not be able to sell the food that they came with. For hand washing, they need to have those supplies, soap, paper towels, and proper means for disposal. And they need to have gotten the water from a safe, potable location. Labeling, as I had mentioned, for cottage food, we want to make sure that they have everything that they need to. As I said, if they have extras that they can put on the spot onto their products, that's the best thing because sometimes you do forget. Some vendors do kind of have their products available just for show or just for display only, and they're not selling that because maybe they didn't want to package it so that you could see it in the best version of itself. Um, we're going to be asking those questions and making sure that they're not just saying that and that they are having it exposed for long periods of times because I know someone had mentioned earlier that like the concern with bugs, we really don't want that getting someone purchasing something like that that could have been contaminated or adulterated. I know you guys had talked about the sampling certificates. We are going to make sure that everyone's compliant with that. and every county's different. So you got to make that early communication to know how is my county different and what expectations do they have so that we can do this to the best of our ability. Kind of how we want communication to flow is if you're a city or municipality, um, we want you guys to contact us. What questions do you have? And how can we tell our permit holders and our vendors to make sure that they're compliant? As inspectors, we do use social media a lot when there's not that communication flow. And social media is a good thing and a bad thing in the food industry because it's all over the place. Honestly, I like using social media, but sometimes it's just a headache and we get ahead of ourselves. So it's nice when we can just reach out to someone via email and know that we're getting like an honest answer. Cottage food operators, I would say if they're from out of county and they want to go to another county, it's nice for them to reach out to the county that they're going to operate in so they know this is how I'm going to do something. If they have that sampling certificate, that they know that they're following that county's requirements and they know what to expect. Some things to consider that might not be at the top of your radar. Weather with the summer months coming up, knowing what to do. If you do get inclement weather, having that emergency phone tree so that you can tell the local health department, hey, we're not having the market this day. Maybe you guys change it, or maybe you push it back a little bit. Or maybe you have another location that you guys can set up that's inside, and making sure that it still complies with everything. Um, and vendors that do have exposed food, it does need to be covered. So with a tent, or maybe you guys are in a nice spot where you have like a pavilion or one of the like a park shelter over them so they don't have to bring something themselves. Um, what to do when something goes wrong? What is kind of the game plan to fix an issue so that everyone can be happy and that things can still go smoothly. Um, Thinking about those things early on when you guys meet with the local health department to know if we run into an issue, this is how it can go. But every situation's different. So we're not going to know until something happens. For power supply, do vendors need to provide their own power, or are you guys going to allow them to connect into like the cities, like a power strip, or do they need to bring their own generator? Um, Talk to the inspectors and ask when will they be there to inspect. Like I said, we're trying to get there at least like an hour before so that we're not stepping on anyone's toes and that we have plenty of time to get out of there. And, some of us do come back and chop to support. So we're not trying to be there all day. We want to be able to be there for you guys and answer your questions. There's always going to be something that comes up that you kind of need more bodies for. So always have enough adequate help and volunteers and workers. Maybe if we run into something, we're going to be looking for you. So if you have like a right-hand man that you can say, to even just like maybe for that first market, you have someone walk through with the health inspector so they know what we're looking at and like why we make certain decisions and how we make workarounds, so that things can run smoothly from there on. And then access to restrooms, depending on how big your market is, and maybe you're not in like a downtown area where public restrooms are available, kind of making sure that you guys either get porta potty rentals and those nice hand sink rentals so that your customers can guarantee that they're going to be as clean and healthy as possible throughout the event. I'm at my questions point. I think I'm gonna exit the PowerPoint and go to those links I showed earlier. But if you do have any questions, this is my email and this is our office phone. So you can feel free to call me and ask for Xavier. I'm in and out of the office Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30. So I'm always happy to talk. Okay, so one second. Hmm. Okay, is this showing anything other than the PowerPoint?
Nope, we're still.
Nope, we're still. Oh, okay.
Say if anyone has any questions or things they'd like to share, feel free to drop them in the chat. I've been keeping an eye too. I am gonna drop into the chat. I did find some more information about the live animals at farmers markets, so I'm gonna put that in here as well. I can't remember, maybe Libby brought that up.
Okay, so I think this is now showing the Manage My Market website. Like I said, this was a really nice tool for us to use so that we weren't just constantly, bothering the City of Bloomington managers. We kind of were able to take the initiative and see changes as they were coming. Like if a vendor canceled last minute, they were pretty good at updating that so we could see and schedule the summer.
All right, I'm not seeing any questions for you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for coming. All right. Don't know where we are in scheduling, but I know up next, Jeannie, do we want to take another break or is Justin ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
Let's just let Justin go.
All right. Justin, can you share your screen?
I'm working on it right now. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Well, my name's Justin Dwyer. I'm a environmental health practitioner for Peoria City County Health Department. I know I saw a ton of people on this call. I've met you at the various conferences, but always super excited to present. So what I'm going to talk about today is farmers market food safety red flags for market managers. We're going to talk a little bit about maybe what you come across, how you might need to address things, when you might need to jump in. And we're going to focus more in on some scenario situations just to kind of create more of a real world aspect in your brain. So first off, if the health department is there, let us be the bad guy. I tell that to my market manager all the time. If there's a problem, let me know. We will take care of it. You have enough going on that you don't necessarily need somebody else mad at you at the market. You have plenty of other reasons to have people mad at you. So in some cases, we're there to enforce. We're the ones who understand these rules and regulations. We'll cue you in when possible. But of course, if we are there, and you see something of concern, let us know. We're more than happy to go and have that conversation with the vendor and address the issue. However, if it's anything like our riverfront market on Saturday mornings, we're there for about an hour and a half. Usually we're out of there by 9:30 in the morning onto other events, and that market is running till noon. You may wind up running into things. So, I always get asked the question, what is public health scared of the most? These are what we're scared of the most. These are the main contributing risk factors to foodborne illnesses. People becoming ill is the thing that we're concerned about the most. Poor personal hygiene, foods from unsafe sources, improper holding temperatures, inadequate cooking temperatures, and making sure product is protected from contamination. So when we're going through and we're doing basic checks of the market, these are the main items that we're going to be looking at, and we're going to verify, because this is how we keep those shopping at the market safe. So what is the main role of a market manager when it comes to food safety? So you as a manager, most of you I know are continuously moving around your market, checking on stuff. You have staff doing it. So you are the first line of defense for seeing something that you may identify as not being correct. In that situation, if you are identifying, you now have the opportunity to help protect public health. If the health, like I said, if the health department is not there, you may need to step in and just ask a couple questions. Now, of course, you don't need to walk in swinging a hammer, demanding, but sometimes show up and just be inquisitive. A good inspector is going to ask very simple, open-ended questions, and then you kind of get that response back, and you see if the vendor knows and understands the information they need to have and need to know. And in some cases, maybe they do, maybe they don't, maybe they have an answer for why something's going on, and it's completely acceptable and it takes care of the concern. The number one thing what we want you to do is we want you to support your vendors. Without you and without your vendors, we don't have farmers markets, we don't have locally sourced foods, and that to me is one of public health's number one goals with supporting farmers markets. Knowing when to act and how to act is another one. If you want some education and extra training on this, you can always work with your local health department. I know I've walked around with my market manager several times, and we've kind of talked about issues or what we're looking at, and it helps cue her in a little better to understand where our concerns are going to fall. So I can't see the chat. But we're going to do a couple violations and just kind of talk about them. I'm going to make this a free-for-all. If people want to come off mute and answer or discuss, we got plenty of time to do that. So let's look at the first violation. A vendor is selling cut watermelon. It's not on ice, no refrigeration. It is just sitting out in the open. So, as market managers, what's wrong in your mind? What do you think the risks are, and what actions might you take?
Well, I'll start with if he's cutting it, he's got to have a clean knife, clean hands. The whole setup for being able to cut things with the disinfectants or the bleach, whatever it is. So most farmers don't have that. They think they're just kind of like letting people sample their wonderful watermelon. And then it's just open to all kinds of contamination like flies and bird droppings. And like in my case, we had wasps all over the bakery products. So that's, disease. You can get disease that way. So, and what actions I would take, I would tell them don't do that unless you're permitted and, have the whole proper setup and everything in the refrigeration to go with it.
Okay, anybody else?
Would they not need to have like the temporary food vendor set up since they are cutting and selling prepared foods as cut watermelon would be?
Yes, so they could be operating under a temporary event. They could be operating under a sampling certificate. So let's assume for this one that they have all the permits, everything's right. Yep, they have the hand washing, the clean stuff, but when you walk by, you are seeing the watermelon just sitting out. It's not on ice. It's not refrigerated. It's just kind of sitting out. Um, what's the what do we have any other concerns or anybody else that feels maybe something different?
You have Eleanor in the chat saying it's not at the correct temperature.
All right. So yeah, answer one. The issue, no temperature control. So the question is ultimately going to be, what temperature control is this product going to be at? Why is it just sitting out? Melons are going to always be a concern. There are some products that can just sit out, ambient temperature, not a concern. But cut melons, tomatoes, things like that we are going to have a concern. The risk is going to be bacteria growth. So you as a market manager, if you assess that there is a genuine concern, you know, that this is going to be the health department's action, it can be yours as well. Ask them to stop the sale until proper cold holding, and then any products of concern, discard. Now, that being said, you might go say something to them. Hey, I noticed this product is sitting out. And they're going to respond, oh, yeah, I have a time as a public health control procedure with the health department. I can keep this product out, or I keep this product out for 2 hours. In that situation, then it's like, oh, okay, good. You have a plan. You've worked with the health department. You're good to go. But if they don't and it's just sitting out, there is obviously going to be a concern. How long is it sitting out for? Is it supporting bacterial growth? Any questions or anything on that one? All right, we'll move to the next one. All right, so sampling salsa in an open bowl, customers are dipping chips by hand, just like this. You walk by, they got the salsa out. Once again, we're gonna make the assumption that everything's on the up and up. They can have this product. They're approved by the health department through sampling or whatever other means, licensure, that they're allowed to do. And you walk by and you're seeing this. All right, what is wrong? What are the risks? What actions might you take?
There's a severe risk of double dipping.
Correct, Jeff. I was waiting for you to pop on.
Yes.
Yes.
My understanding is that the customers cannot grab the samples themselves. They have to be handed by the vendor directly to the customer. So they shouldn't be dipping into the salsa.
So in some cases, yep, depending on the product, but we certainly would be concerned about the customers being able to just grab the chip and dunking them into into the salsa that sells. And I guess we also think of this in a way is this is communal. This is not going to be individual. This is going to be a communal bowl, communal container of chips. Any other concerns? All right, we'll move to the answer. All right, so yep, open sampling, hand contact, so bare hand contact. People are touching the other chips. So we want to try and protect the food product. So our risk is contamination, specifically from bare hand contact. Customers are touching things. They may not have washed their hands properly. They may have just blown their nose and now they're grabbing a chip. So ideally, what we want to do is we want to, I would probably have the vendor discard that specific product. If they're wanting to sample, they could put it on the chip themselves, hand wash station using utensils or gloved hand. They could dip it and then hand it to the customer. They could also do like a single service portion. that they would hand off, which has a couple chips and a little container of salsa. The salsa doesn't necessarily have to be covered, depending on what rules and regulations they're operating under. But this is a good example of protecting that product as you're handing it off. So, requiring single service utensils and avoiding that direct customer contact is the concern. Any questions on this one? All right, we'll move to the next one. All right, so maybe a little different. You're coming by, maybe you've got a big temporary event vendor, and they sell a lot of different things. They're preparing foods on site. They have that full-blown outdoor kitchen running. And as you walk by, you see a bunch of raw chicken sitting above some baked goods that they also sell. So as we're going by, we just noticed all this raw chicken right on that top shelf, and then all these baked goods that they like to sell are sitting right below it. What is going to be the concern? What's wrong? What's the risk? What action might you take as the market manager to intervene in this concern?
Well, I think the answer of the hour is cross-contamination concerns, and I think certainly could be eliminated or alleviated by reorganization. I think your image is giving a little way on that one, but like store the meat at the bottom and not above.
Correct. Anyone have anything else on this? All right. So, yep, issue is cross-contamination, and our concern is pathogen transfer. So we want to make sure that we're protecting foods. So we want to separate raw and ready-to-eat products. Raw products are going to be on the bottom. If it has a lesser cook time, then or does not require cook time, that's how we're considering the separation. In addition to obviously the concerns of cross-contamination, making sure that we're keeping products up off the ground at least 6 inches. We're covering products. We're not intermingling with chemicals. And then we're making sure that we're cleaning and sanitizing our surfaces properly as needed. So, yep, in this situation, I would just have them reorganize the food, get those raw products on the bottom. If for some reason you're seeing that any of that, that lovely chicken juice has dripped down, then we may need to look at discarding some of those food products. Any questions on this one? All right. All right. Vendor is handling money, then preparing food without washing hands. What is wrong? What is the risk? What actions might you take?
Money is really, really dirty. It's disgusting as far as, and then touching the money after, touching food after handling the money is just absolutely disgusting. And, but I would have a question about this. Is it okay to just use hand sanitizer if they're, well, it says preparing food. Even handing out a sample after touching money. I think you should wash your hands anytime you're touching money.
Yep. So one thing to remember is hand sanitizer does not replace proper hand washing. And the main reason is because the hand sanitizer is not going to be as effective as the friction of the soap and removing any debris that's on your hands. But yes,
Exactly.
money, yeah.
Can you also talk about if somebody wanted to use gloves?
I guess in which sense?
They're saying, or use gloves and change them.
Yes. So with gloves, and this is the best way I love to explain gloves. Gloves are turning your hands into utensils. Gloves are not going to be a replacement for hand washing. And the way I like to explain this is, imagine you have a pair of tongs, and you use those tongs to dole out the money. Would you then use those tongs to now maybe grab the chips to put them on a plate with some salsa to hand out? Uh, the gloves are basically just turning your hands into a utensil to avoid bare hand contact. So anytime that we're changing tasks um, and moving into prepared foods, we need to make sure we're washing hands. So a really good example of this would be is if you're handing money out, you're giving somebody change back, you need to wash your hands, then you're going to handle the food sample or the food item. Now, once you're done with that, if you move back to handling money, you don't have to wash your hands. Uh, but once we go back towards handling food, that's when we need to wash our hands. Does that answer the question?
Yes, I think so.
I do have some vendors that kind of insist that if they're wearing gloves, they don't have to wash their hands.
Well, I know a lot of restaurants during inspections that I've had that same issue with. Gloves give people a false sense of security and hope, but they do not replace hand washing, and it's very clear in a lot of the scientific evidence. The transfer of bacteria can still happen when you're taking your gloves off. So hand washing is absolutely 100% required.
And what about washing your hands with your gloves on? I've had people say that they're washing their gloved hands to save on gloves or something. I don't know what.
Yeah, so we definitely do not want to do that. Gloves are a single service item. They are only meant for one particular use. I have been on inspections where people have reused gloves, they've washed gloves, and that is immediately a violation. So, if they don't want to go through gloves, they can look at using utensils, uh, but that's completely up to them and how they're going to handle things. So our main concern for this is going to be poor hand hygiene. The risk is contamination, the action requiring hand washing between tasks, or in some situations, in that situation, we may want to verify that they have a proper hand wash station. This is the easiest station out there to set up. It's the cheapest station. I think a couple of years ago at the Everything Local conference, I brought one down and set it up so people could actually see how simple it is to do. But yeah, this is the absolute easiest way to do this. Any questions on number 4? All right, moving on.
Justin, hold on. We
Yeah.
have a question about what if all products, including samples, are fully closed?
So fully enclosed, you're not going to making direct contact. However, I will still definitely say regular hand washing and using barriers is just going to be a good practice. Pre-packaged products, like I said, you're not coming in direct contact. But especially if you're handling money, money's dirty. Um, I've seen where people keep money in the summer and where they magically pull money out from. Um, yeah, it's definitely not a good thing if you're handling a lot of money and still going and grabbing those samples. So I would definitely still recommend that we're using hand wash, barriers, or things like that. All right, number 5. Go by a stand. There is homemade cheesecake for sale. There's no labels, and it's sitting out at ambient temperature. What is wrong? What is the risk? And what action might you take?
This is not an approved food item under the cottage food rules, since it has to be temperature controlled. Because it contains cream cheese, it's been sitting at ambient temperature. It can then have bacteria growth, spoil, and then you would have to ask them to remove it from their sale table, not supplement.
So the fun one, this is a bit of a trick because cheesecakes are not approved under cottage food. So if you're finding a homemade cheesecake, this is not going to be approved under cottage food. This is a true homemade product that is not going to be allowed for sale at all. So we would consider this, it's a unapproved food. It's from an unapproved source. And in addition to that, there's no temperature control of the product. Our risk is gonna be foodborne illness. It's gonna support the growth of bacteria. And we also don't know the conditions that it was made in. So the action, remove it from sale at minimum, and highly recommend if you're able to have that product destroyed. That's what the health department is really going to want. Any questions on this? All right, number 6. You're walking by a vendor and ice is being used to keep drinks cool in this wonderful cooler right here. It's a hot day, but they're also like let's say they're making the dirty sodas. I know that's a really big trend. As you walk by, they're scooping the ice directly out of this cooler that has these beverages in it, and they're putting them directly into the customer's drink that the customer is drinking from. Uh, is there a risk? What's our concerns? What actions might you want to take?
The soda cans are filthy to begin with, so they're contaminating the ice. And so you're literally serving people dirty ice. And yeah, the risk is obviously bacteria, whatever on those cans. And the action I would take is tell the vendor you can't do that. You got to have separate ice. If you're going to dispense ice at the market, you have to have it in a clean and obviously separate from the where you're storing the cans.
All right. Anybody else? All right. That is spot on. So the ice is being contaminated. I've actually had vendors tell me, "Oh no, I wash, rinse, and sanitize the outside of those cans. I still do not care." My concern is going to be anything that's winding up on that ice is pathogenic ingestion. So my action is going to be immediately stopping the sale of any of those drinks, or I shouldn't say the use of the ice from that cooler, and they can get clean, safe ice and put it in a different container and scoop from that. But they are not going to use the ice that's in a container holding beverages. Any questions on this one? All right. So this is actually a fun one. This happened last year at my market while I was walking around with my market vendor or my market manager. You're walking through your market and you see a stand that normally sells baked goods under cottage food. Now has a large container of lemonade and is selling cups of the beverage. What is wrong? What is the risk? And what is the action that you might take? What do we think? So first off, are they allowed under cottage food to pour cups of lemonade on site?
No.
Correct. They are not allowed to. Cottage food must be prepackaged. There are exemptions to that, but I don't know any health department that would be okay with doing this as an exemption. The exemption was designed for different reasons, but this specific thing is definitely going to be a concern, and it would not be allowed under cottage food. I will also preface that this is not falling under the Lemonade Act. These are not kids selling it. These are grown adults that you walk by and see this giant container.
Well, they don't have wash, rinse, sanitize because they are pouring things? And then also, where was the lemonade made at? Even if it's in a cottage kitchen, like you said, it's not qualified under that permit.
All right. Anybody else? All right. So we're going to look at, oh, go ahead.
Eleanor had a comment that, and if you add new products, their market at least would ask for approval.
Yes, that is one thing I was going to make a comment about on this. So in this situation, we are seeing a unsafe food source. We don't know where this product was made. Is there pathogens that we might be exposing people to? The actions is to stop sale and to discard the product. In this situation, it was actually kind of amusing because I went over and I talked to them, and they blew me off. I went and found my market manager, and because I had said I was going to go talk to them, and she had gone do something, came back, and I said I'm giving them about 5 minutes before I'm super mean. And then she proceeded to tell me they were 5 minutes into the market, or 5 minutes late pulling into the market. They were super rude to her. They were also a vendor uh, that was a fill-in, so they had applied, and she was giving them an opportunity to see how they do at the market. They were never ever invited back again, but lemonade was never on their list. It was not approved under their cottage food. They're registered in Peoria County, so I was fully aware of what their registration approval was. But yeah, that's the other thing to talk about too is watching your vendors when they add foods. I know vendors love to start sneaking foods in. So at the beginning of the season, they may have these specific products, but they get this idea or a new product comes in, and then they start adding things. So as the health department, we're always paying attention to what products are there, but they may not be approved to sell that specific item. Just because the health department says it's okay doesn't necessarily mean that the market is okay with it, because sometimes you guys are watching your levels of competition. All right.
I have a question about the lemonade.
Yes.
Um, we actually, as the market, not selling it, like on a special event day, we hand out little Dixie cups of lemonade that we get from a store. And we keep it in a cooler, refrigerated. And then just these little Dixie cups. Is that a problem? If it's a problem, I want to know.
All right. So are you guys just handing them out as samples?
Just as a little treat, not even a sample. We're not trying to sell somebody else's lemonade. Um, we like, for example, we have a special event day where we're doing celebrating dogs. Actually, we have our dog days of summer, and we just give that as a little treat to people who want it. We're offering a little refreshing lemonade. If they want to, have a second one, they can have a second one, but we're not selling it. We're not promoting it. We just offer it as a little treat.
So in that case, I would talk to your local health department. If you are in Peoria County, uh, you we would have to examine it if it's coming from a licensed facility. We may require permitting to do that. Or what we may wind up doing is saying, well, if you're not selling the product, whoever is going to hand out the samples, get the sampling certificate for the IDPH Farmers Market sampling certificate, and that would cover you, because that would be sampling at a farmer's market. We have a group of nutritionists that like to do prepared products from products at the market. So they'll go around, they'll buy stuff, and then they'll do like a demonstration and hand out samples. And the way for them to not have to have a permit from us every weekend is they use the sampling certificate because they are not selling. And that's worked out really, really well for them.
Thank you.
All right. If anybody has any questions, my email, I'm always available. Janie knows how to get a hold of me. You can always reach out to Dara and Anna as well. I know they are a wonderful resource. Um, any questions or anything like that? Any other scenarios you guys are wondering about? I always love playing Stump the Health Inspector, so it's always fun.
I have a quick question. This is my first year managing a farmer's market. Is there a link or resource we could look at to see what type of items are not allowed under the cottage that are not cottage approved? That could review?
Yeah, so what I would recommend, there's a cottage food guide. It's the Illinois Department of Public Health Cottage Food Guide. I think we're on 2023 or 2024.
2024.
So that's currently the version that's out. I know we're working on getting a new updated one. Janie did post something in the chat as well. ilfma.org has resources as well. But that guide is going to have a lot of the information of what you can and can't do, and Q&A and things like that. And then always use your local health department as a resource as well.
Yep. The cottage food guide, it's on our it's linked to our website.
Yeah, IDPH also has a one-page table with all the prohibited ingredients for cottage food and why they're prohibited that we can make available too.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions? I know Dara loves being stumped, so throw some hard fast ones at her.
I'm just thinking about the lemonade, and if it's a food truck and they're a temporary food establishment, can they sell lemonade? Or is it just lemonade?
I guess I'm not picking up. So do they have
So
a license like a
so a
food truck?
cottage food, sorry. So a cottage food vendor cannot sell lemonade.
Absolutely they can, but it must be prepackaged and properly labeled.
Okay.
We have a cottage food vendor currently right now that's going to do like um like coffee. They're going to do like coffee with like an oat milk in it. It meets everything they're doing, meets those requirements. They're going to bottle it, but it has to have proper labeling, and it has to be prepackaged. That's the requirement of cottage food.
Okay. Thanks.
Can I just say that cottage food is separate from food preparation? So maybe that's something that would clarify making a lemonade, making a drink, you're preparing it, where cottage food is for things that are prepared in a home kitchen, packaged, labeled, and then brought to the site.
Yes, Michelle, you've got it right on. So with cottage food, we're talking about food that was prepared in that home kitchen or that farm kitchen, prepackaged, labeled. The other term we like to use is immediate food service. So if they're offering again in a concession style or immediate ready to eat foods, then that would be something that falls under a food establishment permit, either temporary or mobile, unless it's sampling, which they can do under those other sampling certificates.
Clear as mud, right?
That's why we have a permit table. That permit table does highlight what is allowed under that permit table, under that permit, and what is not allowed.
Your number one resource is going to be reaching out and working with your local health department. If your local health department is not interested or is not a part of your farmers market, using Dara and Anna as a resource at the state level. Same with working with Janie to help get some clarification on food safety concerns. There are plenty of us around the state that are more than happy to help make sure your market is operating safely.
It is possible to get a packaging exemption under cottage food. I talked about it a little bit earlier. those packaging exemptions are provided by the local health department where you're going to sell the item. So if you are looking for an exemption from packaging a cottage food product, you need to reach out to the local health department who oversees the market that you want to sell in and ask them for an exemption.
A good example of that, we've got a cottage food vendor in a neighboring county that operates, is registered in their county. They come to events here in Peoria County and they sell scones. And in that situation, they load their scones into a bakery case. And what they do is they don't want to have everything individual. They want people to be able to choose how many they want and which ones they want, and then package. It saves on packaging. So they every year request an exemption from Peoria County, even though they're not registered here. They will request an exemption, and we have allowed it the past couple of years because they basically are providing us all the information. We're going to have hand washing, we're going to have sanitizer, we're going to do everything safely and correctly. This is how we provide the proper labeling to the product. And we have no issues with that. So we do approve that exemption. And like I said, that is for somebody not registered in our county. If they want to go to another county, they'll have to go and get that from that county as well.
Like I said earlier, though, I think that if you work through your homework of setting that up in one county, I would definitely take your paperwork from that county to the other to kind of demonstrate that you've worked out the food safety considerations.
Yeah, absolutely. Having that food safety game plan that you're going to do, uh, you showing up at my doorstep saying, I have everything, and you have everything in writing, everything's great. It makes us much more comfortable providing that exemption, as opposed to when I ask questions, you just stare at me and shrug. Um, it gives me a little apprehension going, I'm not sure if you're going to know how to do this or not. And I'll have a lot more questions for you.
This is maybe a little off the wall, but based on what we've been talking about, is it a good idea for market managers to get like a food sampling certificate just so we know and go through all that and know exactly how it's supposed to be done? Is that something that would be like a good idea, or even though we're not selling anything?
So you
Jara,
don't
go ahead.
you don't have to apply for the food sampler certificate to be able to access the iTrain course. So we have that iTrain course that I covered, and maybe Anna could drop the course information in the chat. There's nothing that stops you from taking that and not seeking the certification to give the sample. So if you just wanted some background, that would be one source of it. Another is I know a lot of local health departments, they have some sort of guidance or they offer trainings or consultations on temporary food service, particularly because temporary food happens outside of farmers markets too. So a lot of local health departments have resources. We even have a temporary food service guide at IDPH that you could kind of reference as well if you're just looking on getting some background on the food safety considerations.
Yeah, because sometimes I fill in for some of my vendors who are going to the bathroom. It's a little walk away, so they're usually gone for 5 or 10 minutes. And I just tell them, let me know and I'll watch your booth for you. Um, I mean, I don't do things like cutting cheese or anything like that. But if somebody wants a sample of something, other than the cheese, I don't touch the cheese. Um, it probably wouldn't hurt to know exactly what I have to do. Right? I mean, to have that certificate.
I would just echo that a lot of people in farmers market world do not have a background in food. We all come to this position maybe through event planning or just passion for farms or food, whatever it is, but you don't necessarily have specific training. So if you do want to take one of these courses, the least expensive, maybe just a basic understanding I think that that would be highly recommended because when you're more educated, it really does help you observe your market and through different eyes. And I think that could be a real strong benefit. We do have now, I believe, I could be speaking incorrectly, but I think the city of Chicago is going to require farmers market managers to take their sanitation course that they require food handlers. So I think the idea that you all having a good background in food safety, that's why we're doing this presentation, is really key to making sure that your markets operate safely. So I would recommend it.
Yeah, there's a great recommendation in the chat. We talked about two different certifications in food safety when we were talking about the farmers market sampler certificate. One is a certified food protection program manager or protection manager, and that's a long course. I think it's 8 hours and requires an exam and can be expensive. But there are also smaller courses called Illinois food handler trainings that are usually a little bit more accessible. There's a lot of options available for them, and they usually range, I think, between $7 and $15. Justin would probably know more than I do. So
Yeah,
that's
they're
also a great way to get a real brief touch on the food safety in addition to the course on iTrain. The food handlers course is, I mean, we used to teach them when I worked at the local health department, just to like high schoolers and stuff, just because it's a great fundamental background and they could be some local health departments do offer food handler training courses as well. So that might be an option to receive training from your local health department on that.
So of the two classes, the food handler training or the I train, which one should I start with? Do you recommend?
The food handler training is going to be more generic. The farmers market one is very specific to setting up and sampling in farmers markets. So,
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
they don't want to stump you today, Justin. These are all nice questions.
I'm a little surprised Jeff Tables hasn't tried anything.
Trying to respect the audience.
I'm going to stop the recording. So if you have a question you would rather ask off recording, you can do that.